ဒီနေ့ညလည်း method ပိုင်းကိုတော့ကြတော့ method တစ်ခု popular methodology of communicated approach or communicated language teaching. And this topic is not, strange to you. And most of you will be familiar with this topic if you learn widely, right? So tonight's session is about the communicated approach or communicated language teaching. These two names are used interchangeably, right? So in this lecture, there will be introduction and definition of communicated approach, principles of communicated approach, procedure, role of teachers, advantages and disadvantages. This approach is still used mostly and widely all over the world until today. Because now the language trend focus on fluency rather than accuracy, right? Even though you don't know, you may not learn the grammar specifically, it is important for you to use the language fluently or communicatively. That's why CLT is a popular approach until today. So here, as I already mentioned, right, see, communicated language teaching is also considered as an approach rather than a method. It mainly aims to get the communicated fluency and also to develop the procedures for the teaching of the four language scale, right? That's why here, you will learn the interdependence of language and communication. Sometimes you may know the language, thoroughly, but you will be a little weak in communication skill. That's why here, the interdependence of language and communication is also very important according to this approach. So let's start with the definition, right? Communication, as the name represents, is used or represents to express the ideas and feelings of the participant or of the speaker, or to give information to other people, right? That's why language is also called as the system of communication in speech and writing. You will use the language to communicate in speech or by writing, by way of speaking, by way of writing. So here, the relationship between the language and communication you will see. So language is communication. And also, once you communicate, you also learn the language. Once you are learning the language, you also use the language to communicate. That's why communicators do not need always words. So in order to communicate to other people, in order to understand what you say to other people, sometimes you don't need to use the words. So you can use gestures or behavioral expressions. That's why aim is to develop the ability and skills to communicate through language. So this can be said as the latest approach in the English teaching area. Here you will see the linguists and scholars like Woodowson and Bramfield and others, right? They recognize the communication is the very basic function of the language. Once you learn the language, you should be able to communicate according to this approach. That's why this teaching must give priority for communicative fluency in the school curriculum. That's why when the learner learn the language effectively, he use it effectively, he should be able to communicate effectively. So this is also the purpose of the communicative approach. Here, Delham says that, right? The teaching of effective use of language takes care of usage and there is no need to teach grammar separately. Once you are learning the language, you are using the language, you are learning the grammar. So they are not separated. They are not learned separately. That's why the other thing is that you need to pay attention to the learner needs and interests while using the communicative approach. That's why the other important thing is that to know the prerequisites of the learners, right? In your session or in your class, what the learners want to do, want to achieve from your class. After learning the English, after attending your class, what they want to do. That's why you need to analyze, you need to synthesize and study the learner needs and interests. Based on that, you can use the communicative approach by using various activities. And also, Dr. Moller says that communicative approach is a learner-centered approach, right? Learner-centered approach. This approach makes learner to get their competence in the grammar and also the social skill, like what they are going to say, how to see, when to see, and where, to meet the learner needs and larger aims. You already learned some methods, but in those methods, you do not see, and also that they mention the learner-centered approach. But here, CLT, or communicative approach, is mentioned as a learner-centered approach by one scholar. That's why we need to pay attention, we need to give much time to the role of the learner. Another linguistic, David Noonan, not Newman, David Noonan. Here, the spelling is wrong, sorry. David Noonan says the communicative approach is basically a communicative language teaching approach. It's not only the system of rules, but a system of human interaction, right? Human communication among them or to each other by using various behaviors and expression, using various ways, speech, writing, or behaviors, expression, and so on. So you need to be aware that when you are using this communicative approach or communicative language teaching, pay much attention to give time for the learner participation, the communicative time in the lesson. So these are other resources. CA, communicative approach, means to engage the teachers to be more creative, to make activities for communicative fluency by the student. That's why it is also called the communicative language teaching functional approach. And Cannell expressed that the communicative approach involves the learner's creation and use of meaningful and purposeful utterance, right? Purposeful talks or speaking in the target language. The other thing is, it is important to use the target language. The creation of the teacher is also important, as well as you need to give opportunities to create, an opportunity by the student to create by themselves, to talk by themselves, meaningful and purposeful ways, meaningful and purposeful content in the target language. That's why the communicative approach wants to get the communicative competence and also the foreign language skill. So the communicative approach has various names: communicative language teaching and functional approach. The main thing from the teacher side, he needs to create activities to fit with the student needs, as well as to give opportunity for the student creation. Here you will also see another purpose of this approach, right? To get the communicative competence. They are meant to communicate fluently in the target language as they use the mother tongue. That's why you need to give lots of inputs. You need to create the supported learning environments and supported inputs. The other thing is, when you use the communicated language teaching, it is important to create us in the real life situation, the real life context. So that it will be able to generate the learner's motivation, right, to learn communicatively. So, Patul says that learning English by using variety of creative storytelling, games, puzzles, humor, and silly questions, right, are very easy and simply funny in teaching English. So storytelling, you can start, or firstly, you can model the storytelling. The other thing is you can ask students to tell their story by themselves. When they make their story, you can ask them to create like a makeup story. Right? It is not the real story, that they can create their own story, like the makeup story, games, puzzles, and silly questions. Because by using these activities, it's kind of encouraging the student to produce or to make utterance by the student. So these are important as motivation for the student in learning English. So the main concept from this slide is, right, they need to be able to communicate in their target language as they use the mother tongue. But you can use various activities to motivate the student to communicate, to make communication. And the other thing is the term of communicative competence, right, to differentiate the learner's abilities to interact with speakers and also to make meaning and the ability to perform on the discrete points or tests of communicative knowledge. Here by subject knowing as a communicative competence. He means to encourage the learner to ask for information, right? To ask for information, to seek clarification. The main thing is you need to motivate. You need to motivate, you need to stimulate the student to ask for information. And also, you can give the clues so that student will ask for clarification. And also, to use the circumlocution, right? Circumlocution means not telling directly. And also whatever other linguistics and non-linguistic resources they could master to negotiate meaning. That's why instead of telling directly, you can give them clues or general concept or general idea. So the student will ask for further information or they will demand a further explanation. In this way, they will negotiate, they will mentalize to get the meaning by themselves. To speak in other than memorized patterns. According to the Canal, right, this is also called the communicative competence in 4 areas. The first one indents the grammatical competence. Helping the student to master the language codes, both verbal and non-verbal, right, by applying the rules of grammar. Here, they learn the grammar, but not in the specific ways, not a grammatical set of rules. They learn the grammar to use that grammar in their spoken language, in their spoken pattern, right? They learn the grammar to use in their communication. That's why it includes like the spelling, pronunciation, sentence, and other like activities, vocabulary, derivation. Some students also want to know the origin of the words, right? The derivatives of the words, the branches, the word family, something like that. So the first one is grammatical competence. So they will use the grammatical competence or the communicative competence according to the Canal. The second area is the socio-linguistic competence. Here, it refers to the knowledge of socio-cultural and discourse rules, right? It means to express and understand the utterance correctly in the different contexts or socio-linguistic contexts, like between the speaker and listener status or the purpose of interaction, the rules and normal interaction. It also means that to choose the appropriate right language usage related to the social situation, related to the time, place, and social relationship. That's why the utterance between the friends is different. The utterance between the teacher and the students, between the parents and the children, between the boss and the employees. So, socio-linguistic competence is also important. You cannot respond to the teacher as you respond to your friends. You cannot respond to your boss as you respond to your friends. Right? So students should be able to get the socio-linguistic competence when they learn the lesson by the communicative language teaching or communicative approach. And the third one is discourse competence. It means right, to master the entire discourse or context, to master what they want to say, to be able to say well by using the grammatical form and meaning, right, in the spoken or written utterance. And also, you can say one thing in different ways, but it has the same meaning, right? It's discourse competence, like saying thank you, you are welcome, I really appreciate, or something like that. Their meanings are similar, but you use in different ways or various forms. And the last one is strategic competence. Right? This means the ability to apply all elements of the language competence and the psychomotor skill, right? The elements of language competence. Yes, Julia, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Fatang jojo dolo siya.
Oh, sana.
Really,
Yes.
yeah, like,
Naneli ba biyam la?
everyone.
Oh, salon piya mala. Pelu piye piyo mala
Oh,
ba.
all of yeah, ni akan ni ta siapa sih?
Oh, you're ready. Okay.
Saya jojo dolo siapa saya jojo dolo mati.
Eva, thank you.
Okay.
No, le alum ni tahu me. Sorry. So the last one is strategic competence. Sorry. This means that to apply the elements of the language, right, and also the psychomotor skill in the process of negotiating meaning. So, to apply what you know, the language content, the grammar, and the aspects of language and the psychomotor skill, like the expressions or behaviors, in the process of negotiating meaning. Negotiating meanings mean, for example, to be able to understand what you say by other people. So you can use it in various ways. That's why it also explains that it includes the verbal and non-verbal, right? Strategies. Verbal and non-verbal strategy used by the speaker in order to transmit or like to produce the message between the speakers. So in this slide and the previous slide, the Camille stated that this means to master the 4 areas. The first one is the grammatical competence. Grammatical competence means by using the grammar, you use that grammar in order to communicate with other people. The next one is socio-linguistic competence, right? To be able to use the language appropriately according to the situation and time and the people. The third one is discourse competence. Discourse competence means like to use various forms to mean one thing. Because we can say, well, we can use different ways in order to show one meaning, like the discourse competence. And the last one is strategic competence. Firstly, you will produce verbally. When they don't understand verbally, you can use non-verbal communication strategy, like expression, behaviors, like gestures, or like the body language, right? The strategic competence. That's why communicative language teaching, right, use the real life situation, like the real life context. Here, the role of the learners are like the negotiators. They're trying to understand what other people are talking, what teachers are talking, as well as they should be able to express their own ideas. And feelings and attitudes and desires and needs within the group and the classroom, right, while the teaching learning activities are going on. That's why it is important to encourage the student to use the body language as well as the verbal language, right? Verbal utterance. And the other thing is, students should be able to work with the authentic material. That's why the role of teaching materials are also very important in the communicative language teaching. So that even though they don't understand the words, they understand by looking the pictures. Now let's see the other principles of communicative approach. The main thing is to get the active participation of the learner in the communicative approach. As I mentioned before, it's based on learner-centered approach. As well as the lesson also needs to adapt with the needs of the learners and also to provide the learning experience. It is important to take record the learner's interest and his progress by the teacher. And the other thing is give fluency over accuracy. That's why the priority is to get a fluent skill. to get fluency over accuracy. Accuracy refers to use the language right exactly or accurately. Fluency means to use the language spontaneously and effectively. Opposing to the traditional methods like the grammar translation method or the audiolingualism, right? Communicative language teaching uh, puts priority for the fluency. That's why fluency practice should precede accuracy practice. So teacher can, how can I say, ignore the errors of the student, but they can correct the errors later. At the very beginning, when students are producing or making utterance, teacher can omit the student mistakes and errors, so that the speaking skill will become better and better. So the next thing is English language is taught in small chunks and through talks, small chunks. Instead of, how can I say, teaching very long text, or instead of teaching verbally, teacher needs to use the small chunks, like short sentences or praise, also variety of talks. So the language curriculum based on the CLT should be designed in terms of units and subunits. Here, the teaching of language in China is used to facilitate the learner, right, to make constant progress. And also, those chants are also taught, right, by using the simple and familiar talks. Here, you will see the one example. If you want to use the present tense, you can use the schedule or timetable activities. And the fourth principle is to give importance to speech. So communicative approach gives prime importance to speaking skill. So it is important to give opportunity to express the student thoughts and feelings through oral expression. So giving small chunks and using the tasks, designing the curriculum based on the small chunks and units and subunits are very important. And also to give importance or priority to speech. These are the principles of communicative approach. And the next thing, the teaching of functional grammar. Here, functional grammar means, right, you learn the grammar in order to use for your spoken language. You learn the grammar not to use for like the, right, not to learn silently. Once you know one pattern, you use it for your communication. Right? You learn the grammar to use for the various functions, whether you use your grammar to show the agreement or to make request or to show the apology, to say your apology, or for question and answer, like the various function, right? That's why teaching of functional grammar is also very important. So it is important, right, to teach the grammar incidentally through situation according to the needs of the learner. Teacher need to be aware of the situation, whether the situation is the requesting or the question answer or other situation. That's why it could be said that it is an indirect approach of the teaching of grammar. It's not necessary, right, to learn the grammar or to learn the prescriptive grammar. in the communicative approach. Functional grammar is also important when you are using a communicative approach. Now let's see the role of the teacher. In the principle, the teacher is also the facilitator. Not a traditional teacher. Teacher facilitate the student in several ways, right? He is also acting or working as a learner among the groups or with the groups. The tasks and situations are made by the teachers. The teacher has to decide, right, which is the best way to create the situation of which opportunities should he give for the student to make the happy learning. The role of the teacher is a facilitator according to the principle of the communicative approach. Because here I took these resources from different sources. This one, the font size are different. And also, the communicative approach does not encourage formal system of teaching and examination, right? This does not mean in the communicative approach, or teacher don't need to use the test and examination. Rather than that, teacher can use the participant observation techniques. Teacher can observe the student, can monitor the student progress, can take record of the student progress. And teacher can make the assessment by themselves, or can use the self-assessment techniques. As well as students also can make the self-assessment, right? They can assess to each other by using checklists or other techniques. There are also other grammars, other principles, right? Developed by the Richard. He said that the first principle is learners learn the language through using it to communicate, right? Even though they are learning the language, they are using the language. While they are using the language, they are learning the language. This is the first principle of the Richard. And the other thing is authentic and meaningful communication should be the goal of classroom activities. So teacher need to create the authentic, learning materials, can use the real teaching aids. Then need to create the meaningful communication. The third one is fluency. It's an important dimension of the communication rather than accuracy. That's why teacher needs to encourage, right, to speak by the student a lot so that their fluency will become higher and higher. It also involves integration of different language skills, right? Different language skills like verbal, non-verbal, and other skills. And the other thing is learning a process of creative construction and involve trial and error. Creative construction. Teacher will attempt to produce what they want to tell. Or student will attempt, right, to produce what they want to tell. Here, teacher needs to allow them to produce by themselves for the student. Teacher needs to allow students to create by themselves, right? Instead of correcting the mistake. Teachers need to avoid correcting the mistake instantly because students are learning the language by communication, by using trial and error. So these are also some principles developed by the Richard. According to the Branfit, there are also other principles. Meaning is paramount. Meaning means to understand by the speaker and by the listener. This means the meaning is paramount. Meaning is the most very important according to the Branfit. The listener should be able to understand what you said. And dialogue center around communicative functions, right? But they are not memorized. And also contextualization is a basic premise. Contextualization, using the authentic context. And also interpreting the meaning by using the context. The fourth one is language learning is learning to communicate. Right? Your main purpose is you are learning the language to communicate fluently, to communicate well. There will be the drilling practice, but they are only the occasional use. And also comprehensible pronunciation is sought. Here, that's why, as a teacher, teachers need to be aware, right? Some student pronunciation may not be able to produce the proper pronunciation, but you understand and the listener understand what he said. So it is important. Comprehensible pronunciation is sought. And also CLT also attempts to communicate may be encouraged from the very beginning, right? Judicious use of the native language is accepted where feasible. Judicious use of means wise use of native language. In the communicative approach, it does not mean, right, not to use the native language, but you can use the native language wisely, occasionally. Teacher helps the learner in any way, motivates them to work with the language. So, motivation, encouragement, support, and facilitation from the teacher is very important. So that student will work with the language. Language is created by through an error, trial and error, right? It is difficult to say the student gets right at the very first time. So they are practicing like the trial and error activities. These are the principles of the Branfit. Meaning, negotiating meaning or getting meaning is very important. Dialogue centered around the functional grammar. And contextualization, using context and authentic material is also important. Drilling may occur, but occasionally. Pronunciation should be comprehensible, right? It does not mean that students should be able to pronounce as the native speaker, but comprehensible pronunciation is acceptable. Since the beginning of the lesson, since the beginning of the class, communication should be encouraged. Occasionally, you can also use the native language or mother tongue, but it's not good to use the native language every time. From the teacher side, teachers' motivation, encouragement, support, and by the varieties of activities and various ways are very important for the student to work with the language. Students are learning the language by using the trial and error. Students are communicating to each other through trial and error. And there are also other principles by the Johnson and Morrow, right? It said that the first is know what you are doing. This means the teaching and learning activities will be more efficient and effective if both teachers and students know what they are doing. So, teachers and students should cooperate in order to achieve the instructional objectives. The first thing is they should know what they are doing. So it is important to know, to tell ahead the purpose of the lesson or the objectives of the lesson. So objectives of the activity. So that they will know why they are doing this. So every lesson should come with a clear understanding for the learners. Right? They can do something at the beginning of the, at the end of the lesson. Second principle is the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Here, CLT, communicating language teaching is not the ability to handle the language elements in isolation. The whole, right? You learn the grammatical points, but you learn those points in order to communicate, in order to use in your daily life, in order to use for your communicative purpose. That's why the whole is more than the sum of the parts. It is important to be aware of this point. Sometimes it can happen like that you teach the grammar to the student, but you put it in that way. You do not encourage the student to use the grammar in their speaking. This is not good. This is not the purpose of the communicated language teaching. CLT purpose is you can teach the grammar, but you use the grammar in your speaking to encourage for students to use in their daily life speaking. So meaning can be better understood and expressed in the whole context. The third principle, the process are as important as the forms. Process. Right? The quality of language learning process will improve if the communication process and the language form receive equal attention. While you are using the communicative patterns or spoken patterns, you encourage students to use these patterns. You encourage students to learn some grammatical points from those patterns. Therefore, practice of forms of the target language can take place within the communicative framework. The fourth principle is to learn to do it. To learn to do it. This is also really important. So this means only by practicing communicative activities can the learners help, advise, and teach themselves. They are also teaching by themselves. The fifth one is mistakes are not always a mistake. So this means the mistakes, the occurrence of the mistakes are natural for the student because they are trying to do something new, to show something new. So it's not really making a mistake, but it is more on the result of the learning process. Right? Learning process of the target language. So it's not good for the teacher to correct the student mistakes in the abrupt manner. Abrupt manner means like the angry manner or unsatisfactory manner, right? Because this can offend the student feelings. If you correct the student mistakes in an abrupt manner, if you offend the student feeling, it's a kind of making them embarrassed. When they feel embarrassed, they will not produce in the next time. When you ask them to produce to make utterance, because they feel embarrassed because of your abrupt correction. So the behavior and the manner of the teachers are also very important. I mean, in every lesson, in every method, not only in the communicative approach, but also in other methods and approach. So it is important to understand, right? These principles, like Jose and Maro principle, Profit principle, Richard principle, money principle in this lecture. Now, the principles of communicative approach. Now let's see the procedures of the communicative approach. Firstly, you need to identify the specific needs of the language learners, what they want to achieve after learning the lesson, what they want to achieve after attending your class. It is important to identify the specific needs of the language learners. Based on those, you need to prepare the communicative activities and tasks based on the needs of the language learner. Then, you can start your teaching through one-mark exercise or oral communication. Organize the class according to the conversations or interaction situation. From the teacher side, it is important or necessary to give inputs and resources related to the situation. So teachers need to create, teachers need to develop various teaching materials, right? For example, here word cards, sentence strips, and tables and action sheet activities, relevant and authentic text, and pictures and diagram, and also exercise on stress and intonation. And as you understand, you know what cause sentence strips, right? For example, for the sentence strip, in order to teach a paragraph, in order to discuss about one paragraph, you cut the paragraph into sentence by sentence, or you can write the sentence again and matching tables. Here, action sheet activities. Action sheet activities means, for example, you ask students to write down what they think or what they see. There, you can, ask one student to make their body or to make expression what he wrote in on the paper. The other student will guess the content of the student who is making the behavior. This is called the action sheet activities. For example, once the student will write the playing the guitar, the student will stand there and also he will make a behavior as they're playing the guitar. The other student will guess, oh, you mean that you are right, you wrote like they play the guitar or playing the guitar, like that. So this is called action sheet activities. And also the authentic text, pictures and diagrams. So these are the procedure. The first one, the very first stage is you need to identify the needs of the language learner. Based on the needs of the learners, you need to prepare the tasks and activities. How will you start? You can start by the one-mark exercise. Organize the class according to the conversation and interaction activity. It is important to use, right, the different materials. And the next thing is provide or a drill, dialogues and conversation slots, conversation practice. The next stage, it is important from the teacher to encourage the student to participate, every student, in the activity. He can also use the communicative books, course books, and textbooks. It is teacher needs to record the progress of the student, right? He can make the readily available resources material like the magazines, newspapers, and other resources to promote the better learning. And he is reachable to the latest technology. He can use technologies, software programs, and audiovisual resources for the effective communicative skills. So these are the procedures of the communicative approach. There are also other activities given by the scholars. So the first one is information gaps, right? This can be used for elementary or intermediate level. The first one is information gaps. Information gaps, there are various forms of information gaps. Here, one popular form is the describe and draw. Yeah, in this activity, one student has a picture, another student has a plain paper, or other student has plain paper. The, the student with the picture will describe about the picture, but he does not show the picture to other student. The other student will draw according to the instruction of the student who has the picture. So this is a describe and draw. So this activity has many, ideas or many elements of the ideal speaking activity. So it can implement the real purpose of communication. And also the language also can be used. It's also encourage the listening skill, right? The speaking skill, the pronunciation, and the thinking skill, and the drawing skill. The describe and draw. So this is one example of the information gaps. The next activity is surveys, right? In order to make the survey, teacher needs to encourage the student to make questionnaires and surveys. So this questionnaire, the student plan this questionnaire themselves, activity becomes more useful, right? For example, at the elementary level, the present perfect tense or the tense that has been recently introduced can be used. By using the questionnaire, by making the questionnaire based on the taught tenses, it's a kind of activating their language knowledge. For example, if you, allow the student to make the topics of the sleep, they can make the questionnaire the ways of sleeping experience, right? In order to get the vocabulary and new words, firstly, teacher talks about the sleep, or he tells the story about not being able to sleep, about nightmare, about the someone like who often sleepwalks. In this way, students will get many words about sleep or sleep vocabulary. So, when they have finished making the questionnaire, they can ask their question to their friends or to other people or to their family members. But it's good, right? But they cannot ask their family members in English. They can ask their friends in English. It is important to use the target language. So information gaps and surveys activities also can be used. Now let's see the roles of the teachers. Right? The first role is the role of the teacher's role is an organizer. Because it is important from the teacher side to organize the lesson or to make a good organization, to let the student know what they are going to do and why. If the teacher does not explain the purpose of the lesson or does not tell the reason of the lesson or the reason of their activity, the student will have confusion. So it is important to tell students what they are going to talk, what they are going to write and to read about. Teacher need to give the clear instruction, right? And also to get the feedback, to give feedback when it is over. If the teacher omits or does not tell the reason, students will have confusions and will not understand why they are doing that activity. The next role of the teacher is a controller, right? The teacher as a monitor or controller are in complete charge of the class, in complete charge, not authoritarian. The teachers monitor not only what the students do, but also what they speak and what language they use. When teachers are working as a controller, they tend to do a lot of talking when we may feel uneasy about the affair. So this also has a possibility for the student talking time. That's why it is important for the teacher to talk at the student level of comprehension, to use the usage and to use the language to be able to understand by the student. Even though, right, they are using the roughly tuned, comprehensible input. So when the text is difficult, teacher need to, reward or rephrase to become comprehensible for the student. Roughly tuned comprehensible input means the complex content. The content is more complex than the understanding level of the student. There are like the roughly tuned and finely tuned content. For example, you will see the text in the textbook or in the course book. They are adapted. They are rewritten. So, in this way, students understand the text mostly. If they take the original context, original content, it is difficult for the student to understand. So, students should lower his level for the student to understand the content. These are the teacher as a controller. Next one, as a mediator. Teachers need to encourage, right? To motivate the student to participate in the activities, to give suggestions how to proceed their activity. So this is also important. Teacher can work as a mediator in a conversation. Sometimes students will have difficulties in their discussions or conversation. So their interpretation will be wrong. Here, you can correct them to get the correct interpretation, what they are talking. You can use the follow-up question and also answer. Teacher encouraged to use the follow-up questions, right? So we also said that in simulation, the teacher might need to prompt the student with information they have forgotten in simulation. So teacher needs to give the clues, need to motivate, need to ask the, the question, guided question. So student will, remember what they have forgotten. This is the role of the teacher as a mediator. The next role is as a facilitator. To facilitate the student in the communicative process, right? Within the various activity. When you facilitate the student, teacher should act as a resource for the student, as a tutor. The teacher should act as a tutor, the teacher should act as a participant and investigator, as a resource person, as a tutor, and also as a participant, as an investigator. So teacher can act as various roles in the communicative approach. By working as a resource person, Teacher can answer, teacher can clarify the student confusion. As a tutor, can guide the student. And as a participant, can work with student. An investigator can seek the student mistakes and later he can correct the mistake. That's why it is important to make records of the student progress or the mistakes made by the student. So there are two important roles that teachers have to do in the communicative classroom. One is to be aware of what is going on as an assessor, although directly, right, as an assessor. And the other is to be a kind of walking resource center. It means teachers should be ready to offer help if it is needed. When students and teachers is helping the student, he is also assessing the student skill, the student progress. So it is important from the teacher side to give advice, guidance, and also to clarify the student confusion, to give explanation of what the student don't understand. So this is the role of the teacher as a facilitator in the communicative approach. So teacher can take part in the activity, right, as participant. For example, like information gap exercise or jigsaw listening. And the other activity is you can also make the jigsaw activity. Like for example, you can learn storytelling. Story can be created by the jigsaw activity. For example, one student starts the beginning of the story, or one student tells one sentence of the story. Another student continues the next sentence. Another student continues the next sentence. For example, after 5 or 7 students, it becomes the whole story, like that. And then you can start the new story again. You can ask the student to make a new story for next student, like that. And simulation and other things. So teacher can work, he can participate by himself. And also, but at that time, it is important not to dominate the learning process. The English teacher themselves will want to develop their own skill, or for gradually deepening insight into the best way to foster language learning, right? So teachers should develop themselves by taking part in teaching training. This is for the professional development, right? It is important to participate in the teacher training, seminar, and also asking suggestions from their colleagues in order to investigate the efficiency of the new method. So, for the professional development, these activities are also very important by the teacher. If not, it will become the monotonous teaching. Now let's see the advantages of communicative approach. The first one is it aims to develop strong speech habits to get a communicative fluency. It also recognizes the needs of the language learner, right? Provides the learning experience, does not encourage the rigid system of examination. Instead, teacher makes, his own assessment device. You can also ask the student to make the self-assessment. English language is taught in natural setting. You mean in the natural, authentic settings. You use the authentic materials, like authentic context, or create like the real life situation to learn dialogues related to the situation. Audiovisual materials can be utilized, right? So the role of the teacher is a facilitator, mediator, controller, and organizer, various roles, and also as a participant. These are the advantages of communicative approach. Now let's see the disadvantages of communicative approach. So if the teacher is an ill-equipped teacher, if the teacher is not very, good at the teaching or not very qualified in the methods of teaching, the communicative approach will not work well. And the other thing is, the teaching of language will not be successful due to the changes of language policies and attitudes towards the English language teaching. Like for example, you want to ask the student to be able to write well in the examination, to be able to answer well in the examination. In this case, you will give only a little time to practice the speaking or to communicate or to make the interaction activities. So, based on the language policies and attitudes towards the English language teaching, it will not be successful. So, the next weakness is emphasize the teacher make text and syllabus. So, in order to create tasks and to design the syllabus, to organize the syllabus, teachers need to be very qualified and very competent in the English language and about the curriculum. This is a kind of beyond the capacity of the average teacher. This is also another weaknesses. And the next thing is, it's difficult to ensure quality learning and uniform assessment under the care of one or two teachers. Sometimes, the teaching of functional grammar is found inadequate and ineffective. There are several aspects to be taught under language teaching. For example, in the book, there will be prose, poem, drama, grammar, and composition. So, communicative approach will not be able to handle these contents well if the textbook includes all of these, content or aspects of the language. These are some disadvantages of communicative approach. Now, it comes to the end. So from tonight's lecture, you already learned the communicative approach or communicative language teaching. So communicative approach and communicative language teaching are used interchangeably. You already learned the definition, the principles of the communicative approach, right? There are lots of principles. It is important when you use the one method, it is important to know the principles of the method of that approach. You also learn the activities and also procedures of the communicative approach and the role of the teacher, and also the good points of the communicative approach and the limitations of the communicative approach. I hope you already got the new, knowledge from this lecture. This can widen your previous knowledge related to the communicative approach, I guess. Now, this is the end of my lecture and presentation. So thank you very much for your active participation and also attention.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you very much.